So I don't know if I've ever mentioned it before, but as you can clearly tell, I am a huge Indiana Jones fan. Welcome back to more Geek Week videos, everybody. Today, I am doing a video that I have been wanting to do for a very long time, but I have been waiting because we have the new Indiana Jones coming out this June, and so I wanted to do a couple Indiana Jones videos before that, but today, specifically, I am going to be doing an in defense of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, I know what you're thinking. Matt, no, don't do it. Your channel has so much to live for. But I promise you, this movie is not as bad as you think. And I think it actually has gone through that cycle of, like, it came out, people were excited for it, then they were incredibly disappointed in it, and now it's gotten so much hate that people are going back and watching it and being like, actually, it's fine. It's got some problems, but it's fine. But for those people who still think that it is, like, the worst movie ever made, let's get into some critiques and defenses. As always, you know, I will admit the reason I'm doing this defense is because I love this movie, but I'm acknowledging that I have to defend it. So that means that there are things about it that, like, aren't great. So, yeah, like, I'm not saying it's a most perfect movie. I'm just saying that I think it doesn't deserve the hate that it gets. But I do have a couple things myself that I'm like, you know, I don't really love that as much. Like, Mac. Not that he died. I think that was fine. It makes a lot of sense. He was an interesting character, and I liked him. But it was how he died. It just seemed kind of lazy and like, well, you could just get up. Critique number 1. He's too old. Honestly, except for a few moments in this movie, I don't really think that that's that much of an issue in terms of the fighting, especially because for most of it he seems pretty spry, and like where they had to have a stunt double, which is probably where they had to have a stunt double for a lot of the other movies, it's not really noticeable. You know, it all looks mostly fine. Sure, there's maybe 1 or 2 spots where it looks like, okay, yeah, he's a little old here. But honestly, it doesn't really make that much of a difference to me. Plus, Indiana Jones is a part of that trope where the hero almost always wins, but only after taking a lot of punches. He does take a lot of hits and loses sometimes. And I think that that is very apparent in this one, and him being a little older just kind of enhances that. But I think it's, first of all, I think it's just really cool that he's still out there doing this stuff, even though he's 60 years old at this point. But I just think it really enhances that idea that, yeah, he just takes some punches, but he can still win. And sure, yeah, like, he is a little bit gruff and a little bit meaner sounding in this one, I guess, but he's had those moments in the other ones as well. And where they do acknowledge it, granted, they kind of acknowledge this a lot in the movie, but where they do acknowledge it, I think they do a really good job, because they either make jokes about it and make, you know, it's like lighthearted about it.
We were younger.
I still am young.
We had guns.
Get on, Chris! You're a teacher?
Part-time.
Or they make it really deep and emotional, that he's getting older, and you know, that's just a reality of it.
Brutal couple of years, huh, Charlie? First Dad, then Marcus.
Seem to have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away.
Critique number 2. There's too many ridiculous things that happen in the movie. Namely, the fridge. A lot of people out there think that just things that happen in this movie were too ridiculous, like the monkeys and the swinging, the whole jungle fight, especially the things like the fridge and surviving a nuclear bomb because of being stuck inside a fridge.
It's a giant mushroom.
Maybe it's friendly!
Here's the thing. There have been so many other ridiculous, absurd stunts and things like that that have happened in all the other movies. For example, outrunning a gigantic boulder, crawling under a speeding truck, jumping out of a plane in a life raft as it opens up in the air and landing in the water, surviving a ride between 2 floating gigantic boats, and a sacrifice in which somebody's heart gets ripped out and then they are dropped into lava and fire. So I don't think that the fridge is the stupidest thing in the world. Granted, it is probably one of the more absurd things, and yes, probably the least believable of all of them. But still. Plus, Spielberg and Lucas have talked about in interviews that Raiders was originally supposed to be not necessarily like a spoof, but like a B-movie homage based off of old serials of cowboys and other adventurers, and they were just having fun with it. Just happened that it turned out really well, and they did a very good job with it, and people loved it and thought it was like high cinema. So yeah, I mean, it's gotten that reputation, but at its core, it still is just like some fun, ridiculous stunts and action and adventure. Critique number 3. Aliens as the topic of this movie. Well, firstly, honestly, it just made sense that they would go sort of in this direction, because they've already had religious, historical, cultural discoveries and artifacts. The next logical step would just be to go to science and scientific discoveries and artifacts. I mean, that would just be the next logical category to cover. Alongside that, we were in the 30s and 40s for the first couple of movies, most of which the antagonists were Nazis and Germans. But in the 50s, again, the next logical step would just to have the antagonists be the Russians. We were getting into the Cold War and communist, the Soviet, I don't know history as well, but you know what I mean. It just made a lot more sense that they were going to have the Russians be a big part of this. And along with that, what comes with that were scientific breakthroughs, scientific advancements, and things like the space race. So yeah, science was going to be a big part of this. Now, to the aliens themselves, I'll give you that. It's a little bit weird. However, it could have been much worse, and it could have been in the movie a lot more. Really, the weird part about the aliens was exactly one scene, and it was at the end. It was just the one scene that was a little weird, but honestly, that's fine. That's good that it was a little bit weird, because if you're going to be talking about aliens, well, why should we know exactly what's happening? We were like all confused about what's going on. They're shifting in the eyes. But, like, why would we know? They're extraterrestrials from other spaces between spaces, as Dr. Oxley says. So why would we know exactly what's happening? It's a little bit weird, a little bit abstract, but you know a little bit of what's happening there. So I thought they did a pretty good job with that. Now, the idea to have it be aliens in the first place is debatable. But it's not like they haven't done weird, supernatural, eerie things before. I mean, they opened the Ark of the Covenant, and all that happened. Critique number 4, the CGI. All right, well, it's not perfect at all, but it could have been much worse. It could have been used a lot more. There have been plenty of movies since in which the CGI has been just god-awful and everywhere. I mean, really, they did use it sort of sparingly. Yes, because now we have CGI, they were like, oh, let's put it in places. But, like, they did use it only here and there with things that they needed to, like the aliens, which are obviously not real, as far as we know. Spaceships, which are obviously not real. And, monkeys and gophers, which, who even knows if they're real? I mean, what even is a gopher? They did use a lot of practical effects as well, especially for things like, the alien bodies towards the beginning and the middle, and then, the skull itself. And even just like the part where the guy was preserved, Ariana, I think his name was, he's preserved, and then it just crumbles because, the air doesn't agree with him. That was all practical effects, so, like, good on them for that. But, like, in an age where we have, Avatar 2, and, how all that looks sometimes, I think this was pretty okay. Now, like I did with The Hobbit, I just kind of want to talk about just some things that were straight up good about this movie. Of course, I love the 50s time period. I love, especially towards the beginning, you have the people, like the leather jacket guys, you got the Letterman jacket guys, you got all of the costumes and the look and everything. It really lended itself to kind of Spielberg's newer cinematic look that he has, where everything sort of has this sheen to it, like like a sunlight sort of thing bouncing off everybody. You kind of know what I mean. I think, it's like it looks a little brighter, and like they put the contrast up just a little bit. And speaking of Spielberg, just again, the fact that it's directed by Spielberg, so it's just got incredible blocking in every scene, and the camera work. He's so good at it for focusing your eye on things specifically in each shot that he wants you to look at. He just tells stories so well, so interestingly. There's never a dull shot. Especially what is probably my favorite shot of the movie, this whip shot right in the beginning. I mean, it's just like inherently classic Indiana Jones. Climbing up a bunch of crates in this old warehouse of artifacts and discoveries, and just running on top of them, pulling out the whip. swinging onto a dangling light and swinging down. Just, I love that scene and shot so much. And not just how it looks, but the characters. I mean, they had just this stacked cast of Jim Broadbent and Cate Blanchett and John Hurt. They had all these people in there, plus Shia LaBeouf, who plays Mutt, who honestly, I don't think that a lot of people had a whole big problem with him, even though they were like, oh, Shia LaBeouf's in this movie, that's kind of weird. So I didn't put that in the critiques necessarily, but honestly, I thought he was great. I thought he was entertaining, he was fun, he was badass. He really fit in, I think, really well, and it's kind of a shame that he's not going to be, in the next one, because he had a lot of on-set crap going on with Spielberg. Apparently, he was not easy to work with, which, I feel like it makes sense. He seems like he's a little off the wall a little bit. But I really, really liked his character, and the more I watch this movie, kind of just with the movie in general, but especially with that character, I just like him more and more. He was just really, really cool, and, he has some layers, too, because he's not just the biker guy and the cool guy, but, he talks about he loves reading books all the time, and, and he didn't finish school, but it was because he wanted to do more with his life, and I think that's pretty cool. The fact that he, ends up being Indy's son is well, I'll give it this. This was 2008, before all of that, reboot sequel stuff really, really started. And it was, all of the, the big questions and big reveals and stuff. So, they kind of were a little bit ahead on that. So I think that was fine. But I do think it was really cool that it then just kind of became the reverse of Last Crusade, where it was, Indy and his dad, and now Indy and his son. And you literally see that in just, big comparisons as well. And one last thing, the fact that his name is Mutt, never put this together until just last night when I was watching the movie to get notes down for it. Indiana, his name is Henry, but he doesn't want to go by Henry, so he goes by Indiana, which is what they named the dog. Henry Jr. doesn't want to go by Henry, he wants to go by Mutt. He wants to go by his own nickname, and a Mutt, dog. Also, bringing back Marion was awesome, not only because she is obviously the best of all of the Indiana Jones love interests, I guess, because, she's just amazing. I love her. She's so badass and cool. But it rounded out that story because, he had a couple... He was becoming basically the James Bond, of adventure and cowboys and stuff. I think it was cool that they rounded it out and finally gave him that happy ending with Marion, and them getting married. It just... Marion. They're getting Marion. They're marrying Marion. I just thought it was cool that they rounded that whole thing out. And generally, it just had some really cool ideas and action scenes. The motorcycle chase, the jungle chase, which you may not like it, but honestly, it's super fun and awesome. I love the dynamic of the heroes and villains working together towards something because they have the same kind of common goal. And even if it isn't by choice, it's at gunpoint, Indy is so into this adventure, he just starts working with, when they're going over the map, it's all right, now they're working together. And that's interesting, because they're not obviously going to stay together the whole time, but it is interesting that they're all right, let's do this. Plus having the whole Mayans thing come into it, that was really cool, because that was a whole other culture we've never seen before, bringing that into it. So yeah, it wasn't just the alien stuff. There was a lot of other things that went into this movie. So Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I think, is a way better movie than people give it credit for. Yeah, it has issues, but compared to movies these days, sometimes it's a lot less. And honestly, it feels just like a simpler, more fun story than, again, a lot of what we've been getting these days, which is, not always the best argument is it's better than what we have now. But I think that goes in this case to say that it is actually a really fun, simple, deep movie that just goes along with all the other Indiana Jones. And yes, I think out of the four, it is definitely, the lowest on the four because it isn't one of the originals. But I love it. I think it's great, and it has a lot of really cool, fun stuff in it. So guys, let me know what you think of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Do you agree? Do you think it's actually not that bad? What's your favorite part about it? Maybe what's your least favorite part about it? And look forward to more Indiana Jones reviews, because I'm going to do a video where I talk about the other three, and then obviously going to be talking about the new one, which comes out in just a little over a month. So stay tuned for that, and as always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and movies right in the middle. I'll see you guys later.